have always wanted to try making sourdough, but the process was intimidating to you or it looked too complicated, there were too many things you needed, such as a Dutch oven and special baskets and tools, I have got you. Welcome to my channel. My name is Jody. If I can make sourdough bread, you can too. This process takes, for me, about a day and a half. It's not complicated, however, it does take time. So that I will tell you up front, you do not need any special tools other than a food scale or a loaf pan if you do not have loaf pans. I do not use a Dutch oven. I do not use anything special to make my sourdough bread. I make it in sandwich loaves. I did some research on the easiest ways to make sourdough, and this recipe works amazingly for our family. And I'm gonna show you from start to finish how I make my sourdough, and I am sure you can do it too. The only thing you need to find is sourdough starter. You can buy this on Facebook Marketplace. You can put it on a neighborhood chat if you have a neighborhood chat. I got mine from my neighbor. A bunch of my neighbors make sourdough bread. They gave me their recipe because they took a class on making sourdough, and I took one look at the recipe. That's how I know people feel overwhelmed, because I felt overwhelmed. It was a huge process. She sent me an Amazon shopping list. It was too much for me. I just did some research on YouTube and I found a video. Her name is Love Meg, and that is where this recipe originates from. I have tweaked it and made it my own because I don't do complicated. Now hers wasn't complicated. I've just simplified it even more. So you do need some sourdough starter, and mine has been in my fridge. You should do a little bit of research on how to feed and take care of your starter. I leave mine in the fridge all week and I feed it right before I'm about to use it, the night before or the morning I want to make my bread. Now you have to let it rise, so that does take time, but once you feed your starter, which I'm about to do, and your starter starts to rise and it's doubled in size for the most part, you can begin baking. I just took my sourdough starter out of the refrigerator, and you can see a little bit of moisture accumulates on top. That is called hooch. You can scoop that out before you begin. Look at all the bubbles. It is very active and healthy, and we are ready to feed it. Using your food scale, take a jar that is the same as the one your starter is in, and you're going to put that jar on the food scale and tare so that the weight goes to 0. This way, when you put your sourdough starter on the scale, you will only be weighing your starter. You need to use 1 part starter, 1 part all-purpose flour, and 1 part filtered warm water to feed your starter. I have 270 grams of starter. I already added warm filtered water, again 270 grams of water, tared that weight out, and now I'm adding 270 grams of all-purpose flour. This does get a little tight and it gets a little messy in this jar. I'm just going to keep adding flour until I hit 270 grams, and then I'm going to mix this up. It is easy to overmeasure. Grams does not weigh much. I have 275 grams of flour, and I'm going to now mix this. I use these large jam jars because I can fit a lot of starter and flour and water in them. It does get a little messy because, again, 270 grams of starter, filtered water, and flour goes right to the lid. I like to stir this up real good. The consistency should look similar to that of biscuit mix, I would say. You're not looking for a pancake mix consistency. It's going to be in between a pancake and biscuit mix consistency. Just keep stirring, and when you are all done, if you need a little more flour or a little more filtered water, you can make those adjustments. You can see a little bit here what my consistency looks like. I'm trying to move and drop some off my spoon so you can see about what your consistency should be when you're done mixing and feeding your starter. I do pour just under half of the starter into the other clean large jam jar, because this has to rise and it is almost to the rim. I do keep a lot of starter because I use a lot of starter for the sourdough recipe, and I just like to have a lot of starter on hand in case I want to share some. Scrape the sides down so you can see inside this jar, and you're gonna mark where the starter is. I use a dry erase marker, And remember, you need to watch that this rises just about double in size. So I'm going to mark this right now. Once you have your jars marked, you're going to loosely cover them. I have a jam lid. I rested on the one, and this one I'm putting a wet paper towel. I'm going to leave these on my stove top for about 4 to 5 hours. It is almost 10 o'clock. I'm going to go shopping, and I'm going to check them in a little bit. It has been about 4 hours. The starter is rising nicely. I'm going to wait about another hour. I do like to leave the starter underneath the lights above my stove to keep it warm. You can see this is almost double. We just got to wait a little bit longer. The first thing we're going to do is get a large mixing bowl, and I'm going to put it on my food scale. And you're going to hit this tare button here to wipe out the weight on there. So we're starting at 0 grams. The first thing we're going to do is 650 grams of warm water. This is filtered water. Make sure if you have chlorine in your sink water, you are not using that. I use filtered water from my refrigerator, and we're doing 650 grams. Need a little bit more. 661. I'm going to take a smidge of water out. We'll go with 652. So you need 300 grams of starter, and that'd be pretty much this whole jar. And you can see all the nice bubbles in here. This is really active, really good starter. You're gonna pour this starter right into the warm water. We like to do the float test. It doesn't always mean if it doesn't float that it's not good, but if you see this starter, some of it should float. There we go. You see how that's floating in the bowl there? That means it is really good, really active, ready to use. And I forgot to clear off my food scale, so I now have to do a little bit of math. So we had 650 grams of warm water, and it should be about 950 grams now when I add this starter. Okay, so I'm at 908. And I'm gonna have to dive into my next jar just to get to the 950 I need. So that is 650 grams warm water and 300 grams starter. I'm going to put the remainder of my starter back in the fridge now because it has been fed and it has risen beautifully. I'm gonna put this in the fridge, and I'm gonna continue making my sourdough. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna whisk this so that it looks like milk. Let's see so that it resembles milk. And now we are going to add the rest of the ingredients to make the dough. Remember to clear off your food scale. I'm now at 0, and I'm going to add 50 grams of olive oil. You can use vegetable oil or whatever oil you have. It doesn't have to be olive oil. Okay. Clear it off, hit the tare button. Next, you're gonna add 40 grams of honey. You do not have to use honey. If you only have sugar, that works too. Grams of honey. Hit your tare button, clear your food scale, and now you're going to add 20 grams of salt. Okay. And this is obviously the big item. It's going to be 800 grams of bread flour. I use the King Arthur's, but truthfully, I just use whatever I can find at the store. So clear your food scale. And again, this is gonna be 800 grams of bread flour. You can use all-purpose. It won't come out quite as well. However, it does work if you run out of bread flour or if you end up needing a quick substitution. Just gonna clear out the rest of my bag here. Now I'm actually a little bit short. I'm out of bread flour. I'm gonna fill in the rest of this with all-purpose. I told you we do not do complicated, so we're a little short on bread flour. We're gonna add the all-purpose flour. Just watching my food scale. Real easy to dump too much flour in here if you're not careful. 800 grams flour, and then 200 grams whole wheat flour. You can do all bread flour, you can do 800 grams bread flour like I'm doing with 200 grams whole wheat flour. I like a little bit of whole wheat flour in my sourdough for the taste and the appearance. You can do 1,000 straight grams of bread flour. It is up to you. Or you could do a 900 bread flour, 100 wheat flour. I just do 800 bread flour, 200 grams of whole wheat flour. I'm gonna do that now. And then I'm going to mix with a wooden spoon until the dough is, the video that I watched, she described it as shaggy, and I'm gonna show you what that looks like. It's gotta get to 1,000. Okay, there's my mix. And I'm gonna mix this up with a wooden spoon. You need a large mixing bowl for this. Do not try to do this in a medium-sized bowl. Okay, so my dough is combined. I used just a wooden spoon. I do not even have a dough scraper. You can see the texture of this. It's kind of what I mean when I say shaggy. You can see it kind of just has that bumpy, stringy texture to it. And you're gonna just get this combined. Try to scrape it all into the middle here. I mean, I just take my whisk. You don't have to be fancy about it. This is what this looks like. This is gonna now sit for a total of 2 hours, and every 30 minutes, you're going to stretch and fold. And I will show you what that means in a minute. We are gonna first set this over here under these nice warm lights. I'm gonna cover this with a damp towel, and we're gonna let this sit for 30 minutes, and then I'm gonna come back here and I'm going to stretch and fold the dough. If the dough is too sticky when you do your first stretch and fold, meaning your entire hand is just stuck to the dough, just stuck, and it's really not coming off your hand at all, you can add a little more flour. A little stick is okay, but you don't want it to be completely covering your hand. This is what this looks like. We're gonna cover it up now and wait for a half hour for our first stretch and fold. It has been just under 3 hours, more like 2 hours and 45 minutes that the dough has been rising. My husband wanted me to share that he did do 2 of the stretch and folds earlier. He is helpful that way, so I can go out and about during the day when the sourdough is being prepared. You can see behind me here, this is what it looks like. It is nice, it has risen, it is a great stretchy consistency here. And what I'm gonna do now is I'm going to split this into 2 loaves. I'm gonna prepare 2 loaf pans by spraying them with nonstick cooking spray, and that is gonna rise for another 2 hours. And we're gonna do that right now. Easiest thing to do when you are preparing your, I'm gonna get just low, when you prepare your sourdough and you put it in your loaf pans is to just clean your countertop and just put a little bit of flour on this, and that way you can just put the dough on the top and just roll it around and split it in half, and then just clean your counter. That's the easiest way. Just put it right on your counter. I just roll this dough kind of back, just roll it up, and then you just kind of spread it a little, tuck the sides back in, and then roll it again. So just like this, tuck the side in, roll forward, tuck the side in, roll forward. Get a nice dough ball like this. Once again, I do not use anything special. I'm just gonna literally cut mine in half. I'm gonna get a little more flour. It's just a little sticky yet. And now I have 2 equal sized dough balls here. And I'm gonna roll these and put them in my pans. It is late. It is about 10:30. You can start your dough the night before, meaning take your starter out of the fridge the night before you want to bake your bread. I do this late, right before bed. Feed your starter, put it under the stove lights, and you can start first thing in the morning with adding the warm water and whisking if you don't want to be baking your bread at 10:30 at night. The key is that your bread has to sit for 1 hour when it comes out of the oven to cool before you can cut into it. And this is a very hard thing to resist. So I think it's easier to just bake my bread late at night, take it out of the pan, set it on the cooling racks, and let it cool completely overnight, and then we can have it for breakfast. I'm gonna show you my dough, and it should have filled the pans and risen nicely, and we're gonna bake it now for 30 minutes on 400. The key is when you are not using a Dutch oven, you're gonna do one of 2 things. You're either going to cover your loaf pan with another loaf pan to create steam, or you can put a pan with water in your in your oven, and that will create steam as your loaves are baking. Either is up to you. You don't have to do either of those things. You can just bake the bread. I'm going to try to cover my loaf pans with another loaf pan today. That is something I have not done yet. I have been using the water in the bottom of the oven trick. I'm gonna uncover these loaves. Oh yes, you can see they have risen beautifully. They only filled a portion of this pan when I originally put them in here to rise. We're gonna put these in the oven. I bake them right next to each other. To create the Dutch oven effect, I have taken a pan and placed it over my 2 loaf pans, and this is going to create steam, and the dough will rise and hopefully have that really wonderful crispy crust. We're going to close this up and bake for 30 minutes. I'm going to take this pan off first. Let's be surprised together. Oh my gosh. Look at this bread, guys. This bread looks amazing. I can tell you right now that that loaf pan trick works much better than having the pan of water in the bottom. Either works, but these look amazing. Look how that top has just split open. Now you see why I bake them late at night, so I do not cut into this and try to eat it right now. These have to sit for 1 hour. I'm going to brush these with butter, take them out of these pans, set them on a cooling rack until tomorrow morning. Guys, look at these sourdough loaves. Absolute perfection. The reason we do wait an hour is because if you cut into these loaves too soon, the center can be gummy, and that has happened to us before. Public service announcement, it does happen. It did happen to us. We will see these in the morning. So good. We just got back from church and running our errands, and I literally rush through errands just to get home and try a piece of my sourdough. If I know this is home waiting for me, I move extra quick. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope this was helpful to you. I hope that you give it a try, and if you do, please comment below how your bread turned out. Just remember, your first couple loaves won't be great. They'll be dense. They might not be perfect. Maybe they will be perfect. I've been doing this every week for about 5 weeks, and I have it down. And I am so glad I was able to share this with you. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon.